From the crossroads of Europe and Asia to the front lines of global diplomacy, Turkey is positioning itself as a bridge between worlds.
Dünya beşten büyüktür.
That call for a more inclusive world order, one that gives Africa a greater voice on the global stage, has become a cornerstone of Ankara's foreign policy. As Turkey hosts the NATO Summit 2026, it is seeking to do more than shape the alliance's future. It is also presenting itself as a bridge between NATO and the global South.
When Ankara says it can bridge the NATO and the global South, it's not just a claim, there is a substance behind it.
Founded in 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, remains the world's most powerful military alliance. Turkey joined in 1952. Today, it fields NATO's second largest army after the US. Analysts say the NATO summit is an opportunity for Ankara to pursue a much broader foreign policy.
Ankara is doing something quite sophisticated here. It's using the summit to itself as a platform to reframe NATO's strategic priorities, pushing the alliance to pay more attention to what it calls the southern neighborhood, namely North Africa, the Sahel, the Red Sea corridor. And in doing so, it positions itself as the indispensable interlocutor between the Western security frameworks and the African continent.
Over the past 2 decades, Turkey has steadily expanded its footprint across Africa. Today, it has 44 embassies on the continent, while Turkish Airlines serves more than 60 African destinations. Alongside billions of dollars in infrastructure investment, Ankara has also deepened its security partnerships.
Outside NATO, it has spent 2 decades building a presence in Africa that no other alliance member comes close to matching. Turkey presents itself to African partners as an Afro-Eurasian power, not Western, not colonial, but connected to both worlds. That framing is effective, I think. It allows Ankara to offer African governments access to NATO standard military technology and security expertise without the political baggage that traditionally comes with Western engagement.
That colonial baggage is what some NATO members are still struggling to shake off.
Unlike France, Britain, or the United States, Turkey arrives without that weight, and this opens doors and creates goodwill that money and technology alone cannot buy.
In terms of trade and economy, this is very important. Turkey is today definitely an industrial powerhouse. And you know better than me that we here in Benin, we are working today to improve our industrial, the contribution of industry to our GDP. So we start processing our raw material, cotton, cashew, etc. If I took the example of cotton, for example, Turkey is one of the powerhouse in terms of textile.
Turkey rejects both the old colonial model of resource extraction and what many African governments see as the Chinese model of debt for infrastructure. Turkish construction conglomerates have completed nearly $100 billion in African projects, airports, railways, stadiums, hospitals.
La Turquie vient de développer ses relations sur la sécurité en Afrique, aussi pour la défense des pays contre les attaques terroristes.
La Turquie a beaucoup d'expérience dans sa région avec les activités terroristes séparatistes en Turquie. Et depuis au début de 2020 en Afrique, plusieurs pays ont vécu de grands problèmes qui ont besoin de la défense et aussi de la sécurité, surtout dans le Grand Sahara.
That experience has also shaped Ankara's security partnerships across Africa. From Somalia to Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Turkey has contributed personnel to UN peacekeeping and stabilization missions.
Turkey also has an approach that I think should be lauded, of dealing with central governments and not dealing with opposition groups. And this one means Turkey, whenever they take part in stabilizing or sending military equipment or forces in African territories, then they do that with the consent of the central government.
Ankara promotes what it describes as win-win partnerships, an approach that differs from Western models.
In security, the contrast is especially sharpest, where former colonial powers historically favored footprint-heavy models, thousands of ground troops, permanent bases, direct intervention. Turkey offers something structurally different. It provides cutting-edge, combat-proven hardware without the political conditions, no approval delays, and critically, it focuses on building state capacity.
I have firsthand witnessed Turkey's contribution in terms of building capacities of government, agencies and institutions in Africa. Somalia is a good example of that, with Turkey taking part in rebuilding and supporting the building of government institutions after years of civil war. These institutions range from ministries, the parliament, from other government agencies.
The logic here is that you cannot train a military to defend a state that has no functioning economy or public services. Stability requires both.
Nearly half of African countries have signed defense industry cooperation agreements with Turkey, many including Burkina Faso, Algeria, Chad, Morocco, Ghana, Kenya, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, Somalia, Rwanda and Uganda have imported Turkish-made military equipment.
Top of your mind, which is Turkey's most sophisticated military equipment and how is it a game changer?
The most sophisticated equipment, Bayraktar, TB2 unmanned aerial vehicles. The Bayraktar TB2 became famous in Ukraine, but it was already reshaping African battlefields before that in Ethiopia, Libya, Somalia, and Mali.
As NATO leaders gather in Turkey, Ankara is making a stronger point about its place in the world. Influence is no longer measured only by military power alone.
The broader lesson for NATO is this tie security to prosperity. Turkey has written a new playbook for middle power engagement, non-colonial identity as a narrative asset, technology over troops, security bundled with commerce, institutional ecosystems with further long-term. That model is coherent, its results on the ground are visible, and it's reshaping what partnership with Africa can look in the 21st century.
Amid the ever-changing global power balances, one thing is clear. For Turkey, Africa is no longer a distant foreign policy priority. The continent is increasingly becoming central to Ankara's vision.